Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast, episode 42 with Charlie and Justin. Justin is back from the beach, and everything's changed because we're recording on a different day at a different time.
Yeah, it's weird.
No one knows, though, or you guys won't see it because we'll still release this on Saturday. But instead of doing it Saturday morning, which is typical for us, we're actually recording Friday night.
Yeah, I would say night, yeah.
Doesn't seem like it's too late, but it's still 8:45 now that we've started recording here. So definitely atypical than what we're used to. But, so how was the beach? Are you glad you're back?
Yeah, man, it was awesome. I love vacation. I like, it's almost like a trip away from reality for a minute. But it was weird. On the way home, me and my wife both were talking, and she actually said it first. She's like, I was ready to leave on Thursday. And we left Sunday. Yeah. So I was like, I've never thought I would say it, but I was ready to leave on Thursday too.
And it just continues to kind of allude to what we talked about being back on schedule and wanting to get back to, I don't know if I'd call it the monotony of things, but the
normalcy.
Yeah, the normalcy and being regimented. It fits our personalities a lot better. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've made it back to the gym a couple times then?
Yeah, all week. I actually missed this morning. Somehow I slept through my alarm, but I got pretty cool biofeedback from my body. I woke up naturally with no alarm at right on time to go to work. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I woke up late because I normally get up at 2:30 to go to the gym. Yeah, and I got up at 4:15. But that means that I'm getting the right amount of sleep. Mm-hmm. So that's good. Yep,
and that's always important. I mean, it's pretty crazy to think that you're the type of person where you said, "Oh, I overslept," but you're still up at 4 o'clock in the morning versus 3 o'clock in the morning. So
it'll be a weird night tonight because I'm gonna go after we get done recording here. I'm gonna go and hit a back day, get a good deadlift session in. So, and then tomorrow I'm gonna go for a run. I think instead of lifting legs.
Yeah. Transition back to the diet.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. It's better this way.
Yeah.
It's fun to kind of, I wouldn't say drop the diet, but stray a little when you're on vacation. But that goes away pretty quick. The want to, eat other stuff. I like you said, the normalcy and that routine. I'm a big fan of the routine.
Yeah.
So it's nice getting back to everything being normal, and I feel better. I always feel better when I'm eating the right food.
That's why I'm excited for school to start again, because now I'll be back into the regular routine of what I've been used to. Now, summer I developed a routine, but it was different, because you have more clients spread throughout the day. And it was great because most of mine were pretty clustered, but there were still a few days where I would have like an hour or two break in between, a group of clients or whatever. So it would kind of need to be filled with, all right, let me run home, grab a shake, or make some meals that I didn't get the opportunity to make earlier. Whereas I like being, back to back with things.
Yeah.
So now that school starts next week, I'll be back to working at the school in the morning or throughout the day, obviously, and then afterwards getting to train and then train clients till the evening. So it'll be nice to be very regimented and not have any breaks or skips in my day, because I'll know exactly what to come and stuff. And then it sets up my weekends nicely, because now I can have more clients on the weekends versus during the week, because I have less time during the week. So that kind of allocates the necessity for them to be
on the weekend.
On the weekends then. So
right.
Looking forward to the school starting too, because, summers are nice, but definitely they need adjusting. And then once I feel like I finally adjust, and it's like right back to school.
Right, right. Well, and I'm sure, your school year got cut short, super short last year, and you do this more it's your job, but from what I can tell, you enjoy the kids more than anything.
Yeah, and it was weird to not have closure for the school year too, because every year, when you end, you get to say goodbye to everybody, kind of set them up for their next journey going on to the next grade level and stuff. Whereas for us, it was very abrupt ending, and then you had to say your goodbyes via Zoom. It was just a very weird, abrupt ending, unlike anything we've ever seen before, of course. Right. So there was no closure there. So it's nice to get, heck, we were off of school. I think that I'm pretty sure it was like 180 days. So it was like a whole school year's worth of school not being in school.
Right.
If you count like the time we missed when the pandemic started, and then coupled that with the summer. So it was really, really strange. And overall, like I said, just excited to get back to the normalcy of everything. It's particularly sports too. Everything starting back up and stuff. It like life is starting to feel a lot more normal.
Right. I hope that I hope that we don't go so much back to the old normal that people forget about the hygiene.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that when the pandemic first started, that we were kind of curious to see how long it took before people stopped washing their hands or started sharing drinks again and stuff like that. And not to say I'm a germaphobe, but I'm definitely more conscious about that stuff now.
And I think even more importantly than that, not that hygiene's not important, obviously, but even more important than that, I think if you were to create a hierarchy of, worries that the coronavirus should instill, I think number one would be metabolically taking control of your body and your health overall, because that was my biggest thing. And we talked about it before as well, where when the coronavirus hit, I was hopeful that people would take a health-centric approach to this. And instead of running and hiding from it, you need to be a little bit more proactive about what you're eating, what your supplements are, your stress management, how many hours you're sleeping, how hydrated you are. All those sort of things are going to play a huge factor in your response to fight any illness or disease.
It's like everybody wants to be the strongest person or the fastest person, but they don't want their bodies to be the strongest to do its job. Yeah,
you can be strong externally, but you're going to be limited if you're not strong internally too. I think that's where people miss the boat for sure. So I hope that sticks around. And you can kind of see that, like, to be honest, I've noticed it start to wane, at least in a small group of people that I've seen, where it's, I can't speak like nationwide or worldwide or anything outside of my little circle, but it seems like people were starting some healthy practices, and then slowly they're starting to taper away from those because fear is the big motivator. And as time makes fear less severe.
Right.
So like as time goes on, that initial scare kind of starts to titrate down a little bit. And then all of a sudden you're less nervous than you were before. So, okay, I can go back to eating the way I was eating.
Right.
And I'm not saying that like I eat perfect. I mean, I would like to think that I'm pretty close from my goals to that, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's like everything. There's ebbs and flows to it.
Yeah. I think that things have changed in society some in the healthy eating aspect. Not drastically, but when I first started dieting and losing weight, one of the first things I did was I avoided the middle of the store.
Yeah.
I only shop the perimeter of the store first. And then if I need to get like items from the middle, I will, but I don't do the middle first and then work my way out like I used to.
Yeah, and so you have your produce, fruits and vegetables on the outside, animal products on the outside, even dairy has its place on the outside. Right,
and then all the stuff that's not good for you is in an aisle, in a box that doesn't need to be refrigerated. So I heard that a long time ago, and that's kind of one of the first approaches I took to weight loss. But in healthy living in general, not just weight loss. But now, so I guess what I was getting at is back then it was like the outside of the store was like always kind of dead.
Yeah.
And now it's like you're fighting to get into the produce section.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people were like consciously doing it. I think like subconsciously people were just trying to be better.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I like that. I like seeing people do better for themselves.
Well, I think knowledge as far as eating healthy is at an all-time high. Like everybody knows that, a huge blanket statement here, but most people know that overall eating processed foods is not as good for you as eating whole foods. Like we all universally, that's kind of an accepted idea. So I think that people are getting to the point where they know more. There's just not the practical application yet, at least as far as it could be.
Well, and enough time hasn't elapsed to see the results either.
Yeah.
Like it's Rome wasn't built in a day, so America wasn't obese overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd have to see what the we'd have to see what the outcome is in like 12 months.
Yeah, for sure,
at least.
Yeah. And like you said, it's just going to take some time. So other than that, man, not much in terms of training on my end. I know we usually start off with like the training on both our ends. Mine's still largely the same, which is good. We had a couple bodybuilding shows.
Dude.
Some people that I know placed high. I mean, we had Natalie Spirka, who was one of our guests on episode 8.
Yep.
So she was our second guest that we ever had on. So if you don't know Natalie, go check her out. We're going to plug her some more. and she will be back on for future episodes. She started her competition season in Phoenix, I believe. She was out in Arizona for a regional show. And I'm sorry, Natalie, I forget what you placed there. She didn't win her class, though, and I know that was upsetting to her, especially at a regional show, because she likes to compete at the national level, so she expected to do a little bit better. And some of the feedback was that she was a little bit too lean. So for the listeners that aren't familiar with her category that she competes in, she competes in bikini, which is where they don't want the girls to be too lean and be too shredded, because it takes away from a little bit of the fullness and in my estimation, a little bit of the femininity that the class represents, So what Natalie did was she fixed it for her next two shows, which were national level shows. She did Junior USAs, where she came in 8th, which is extremely good considering the level of competition, because girls are fighting for pro cards there.
Right.
And then she came in 4th at the North Americans in Pittsburgh. So she was only, she was in 4th, and the winner of that class, whoever comes in first, gets a pro card. So she was within striking distance there. And she definitely fixed the being too lean part, where, she kind of added some food back in, and her coach had her back fuller and rounder, and she looked a lot better by judging standards at that show. So obviously it paid off for her.
Natalie's awesome to watch. Her journey through this is really fun to watch, because she is so dedicated.
It was really cool too, because there were some people that I had beat, well, not necessarily that I had beat directly, but people who had won or had not won their weight class, and then I went against in the overall and had a better score than, and those people turned pro. So I beat someone who turned pro at the last show, which was really cool. Not that I'm saying that I'm pro caliber by any means, but it was just pretty neat to see, like, hey, obviously there's people out there making improvements. That was kind of one of the things that I've been dwelling on today. Not in a bad way, like, oh, I beat this guy who beat that guy, and that guy is a pro now. Not in that sense. But in the sense that, like, why can't I do something like that then? Because, like, we've talked about that in other episodes. It's like, people don't want to say, it's like, I think last episode we mentioned the book that Dr. Livingston sent me.
Yeah.
The Instant Millionaire. Gosh, I'm still messing up the title, or Overnight Millionaire, or whatever it is. And I'm actually going to see Dr. Livingston tomorrow morning. I'm going to be listening to the audiobook on my way out. But you never know. I don't want to say how easy something is, because that's not the right term. Just how doable something is.
Right.
Until you actually do it. And then once you do it, you realize, oh, I can do this. And so many times, and I know we talked about this last episode, particular with bodybuilding or anything, you say, oh, well, that person those pros have great genetics, and I can't do that, And then you sit and you say, well, I've beaten guys who have turned pro. This is actually, and there's been guys that I've beaten, one guy in particular sticks out. I beat him in the overall in a classic physique show. And it's like, now that guy's a pro. So it's like there's multiple guys. And then you kind of have to look introspectively about it and say, hey, what am I not doing everything that I could do, because these guys are improving maybe better than I'm improving. Right. So then it motivates you to try even harder. Absolutely. So you kind of have to have a good head about it. Let it kind of be twofold, is look at it as a confidence boost to know that you're competitive enough to beat those guys at one point. But then you also need to look at it on the opposite end, not as a negative as in it's going to set you back mentally, but negative as in like, oh, well, I can step it up because those guys improved and they're pros. So what am I doing? I got to turn it up a notch. Kind of lights a fire under you, for example.
No doubt.
So that was kind of something that I've been thinking about all day, is like, in regards to anything that you do, why can't it be you? Like, why can't you be the person that does this? And I mean, we talked about that early on with the podcast, where the expectation isn't necessarily to be the next Joe Rogan, but then you ask the question, why not?
Right, and I mean that, why not? Like, and not that I want to dethrone the podcast king, but why not?
I mean, we had our highest download month. We had almost 700 downloads just this month alone, and that is kind of a skewed number even, because that's not counting YouTube or Spotify or any of the other outlets we're on. That's just our Libsyn downloads alone.
Right.
So you got to assume other people are listening on other podcast platforms too, for sure. So it's like, holy cow, we had almost 700 downloads this month just on this platform alone, which is pretty incredible for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's, just so small time.
Yeah.
We're getting them kind of numbers. I mean, that's almost 200 an episode if you
Yeah.
If you look, I mean, the average is close to what 125 an episode. That's crazy.
Yeah. And we're still not, a year into this.
Right. Yeah.
Almost getting there.
Yeah. So I actually have like that whole concept of not thinking you can do something, and then when you look back and after you've done it, and you look back and you're like, man, I guess I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to check myself when I talk to people. Like, 'cause I have people that ask me all the time, and we talk about this all the time, where they'll ask me about losing weight, how do I do it, or can I help them, etc. And I really don't, like, I know how I did it. I know how I started doing it, and then I know what we did together to get it to, to where it went.
Yep.
But I almost oversimplify. Like, I almost make it seem like it was easy because the concept is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's literally just the work part that's hard.
Yeah.
And I have to check myself and remember sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have to remember how hard it really was.
Yeah.
And
especially when you're working with people
where I was at,
and they're trying to get to where you were.
Right.
Because for you look back and say, wow, this is all that I accomplished. Like, look how much weight I lost, blah, blah, blah. And then you have to remember how hard those initial first steps were when you work with people because, take bodybuilding, for example. I can look at a client who's, what I would call a gen pop person. So a general population person has no aspirations of competing, just wants to lose a little bit of weight, be healthier, maintain a high level of performance in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever that entails, going to work with high energy, sleeping well at night, all those sort of things. And it may be difficult for them at first because they've never followed a diet. They've never been too aware of their nutrition. And it would be very easy for me to say, what do you mean you can't stick to a simple diet? It's only 4 meals a day. I eat 7 meals a day for this long when I'm dieting, this and that. But, I have a very understanding approach with it, and I can see things through their eyes because I know what it was like when I first started competing or when I first started trying to put on muscle or when I first started working out in general. I know those initial steps.
Right.
Like, you have to kind of check yourself. I think that's a good word for it or phrase for it, like that you use, where you have to remember what it was like to be in those shoes so you understand that it's going to be a slow start.
Right.
Like, because, you lost a lot of weight in a day or in a year, but you didn't lose that much weight in a day.
Right. No, and there was never one day that it was an exceptional amount of weight that one day.
I mean, if you say to someone, hey, could you lose 50 or if you lose 50 pounds a year, would you want it? People are going for weight loss say, yeah, 50 pounds, that'd be amazing in a year.
Yeah.
That's only a pound a week.
Right.
So if you say to someone, can you do a pound a week? Say, yeah, I could lose a pound a week. That'd be easy. Okay, well, if you do that every week for a year, that's over 50 pounds. You can do that. So it all depends on the perspective that you turn it to.
And I've been the guy that said, I can do that. I can lose 50 pounds a week or 50 pounds a year. It's a pound a week. That's easy. And then failed.
Yeah.
And then failed.
Yep.
And then gained 50 pounds that year.
And then it goes back to the J.M. Blakely thing that we talked about where, okay, well, once you miss 1 week, now you got to double it.
Yeah.
And then if you stay stagnant, your weight loss for 3 weeks, then you got to triple it. Yeah. So it keeps going and going and going. So it's like it requires you to stay consistent,
That's why I think progressive overload works so well. Is because you don't have that weekly goal. It's just get better than you were last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it's, it needs to be progressive, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to lose a half a pound.
Right.
Or a pound. Maybe it's 0.3 of a pound. Because some weeks you'll be overshot too.
Right.
Some weeks you'll lose more than you expect. But as long as you can't expect to lose perfectly every week or gain perfectly every week, but as long as that best fit line is trending in the direction you want. So if I'm trying to gain weight, is that line progressing upwards overall over the course of a month? Or is it trending downwards overall over the course of a month? Because the day-to-day thing, there's going to be so many variables at play, like, did you get adequate sleep? Are you adequately hydrated? Were your meals on point? Did you miss a meal because something came up? Is your stress management okay? Are you having, mental stress from work, physical stress from work? So there's so many things that are at play that every single day isn't going to be a win.
Right.
But if you have 25 win days and 5 loss days in a month, that 30 days overall is going to be much greater.
Right.
So you kind of need to look big picture, but still have a micromanaging approach to focus on the day-to-day thing and then hope that you can kind of like the aim small, miss small, aim big, miss big. You can't aim for month goals. Right. You got to aim for day goals. But then when you count them up over the month and say, how many good days did I have, how many bad days did I have, you're certainly going to have more good days than bad days,
right,
I think.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're trying.
Yeah.
If your goal is to lose weight and you have a diet and you plan to, and you are trying to stick to it, you're definitely going to have, you would hope anyways, I guess I shouldn't say definitely, but you should have more good days than bad.
And I have, there's so much importance with goal setting. I mean, I feel like a broken record because how often do you talk about that? I had a friend come up to me in the gym today as I was training clients, and he said to me, hey, what's like your ultimate goal with this? He's like, what do you want to do? He's like, do you want to be, a strength coach at like a Division I university and work with a sports team? He's like, well, what's the ultimate goal? And I didn't actually have anything measurable for that. Like I didn't say there was an end. And what I told him was, and this kind of popped off in the top of my head, I just came up with it on the spot because it's true. And I thought to myself, you know what? I have to start telling people how that's my approach to things. I've never kind of verbalized what my goals are specifically to people. But when I said it out loud to them, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Not that I surprised myself that I said it, but it was like, I've never told someone what my approach is. And I think that they could understand it better if I did. I told him, I said, I don't have a certain place that I want to be. I said, but my approach is I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, but just continue getting better at it every time that I do it. So if I train people, I just want to be a better trainer each session that I work with them. Or if I'm recording a podcast, I just want to make sure that our podcast continues to get better every time that we record an episode. Or if I'm in the gym and I'm lifting, I want to make sure that I'm a little bit stronger each time, that I train. And if I continue to do that with the podcast, if I continue to do that with my approach to bodybuilding, if I continue to do that with my approach to clients, if I continue to be a better teacher every time, then I'm going to get where I want to be.
Right.
Where that is, who knows? But I can guarantee you that I'll get there as long as I'm progressing every time. And that's kind of the discussion I had with Natalie. We were talking about, with her competing and stuff and her placings. I said, you know what? If you get better every time, especially now that you finished top 4 at a national level show, if you get better every time, you're going to win eventually. Yeah. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be with placing because she may get better at her next show and come in 5th.
Right.
But as long as she's better than the last time, she's not going to continue to work down. It all depends on who shows up.
Right.
Some girls,
what package they bring.
Exactly. You can't control what other people show up as. You can only control what you show up as. But if you get better every time, there's going to be a point where it doesn't matter who shows up.
Absolutely.
If you keep getting better. So I think that's kind of a metaphor that you can transpose to pretty much everything is do what you do, but just do it a little bit better than you did last time.
Right.
And that's kind of our approach to the podcast too. I think I don't want to say that every podcast is exponentially better or better at all than the last one, but I'm sure if we listen back, our communication is better, our flow is better, we have a little bit better sound quality. I mean, if you look back 15 episodes, probably 15 episodes, we didn't have music.
Right.
As an intro song or an outro song, so it gets more professional in that regard, because we talked about it on another episode where I talked to Aaron Singerman, the CEO and owner of Redcon One, and I talked to him because he's run a lot of podcasts, throughout his comeuppance, but now he's kind of solely involved in the whole supplement business. But Aaron and I talked, and I said, what are some pieces of advice you would give to someone starting off, who has ambitions of making it, I don't want to say making it big, but getting a better quality. Right. And he said, it's just that. He said, focus on professionalism. He said, you want to look, sound, and feel professional before you approach high-end people to be on your podcast. Because if it's a crappy production value and you approach someone who's not a crappy person, a well-versed, very successful individual, famous individual, say, I want you to be on my podcast, but it doesn't sound good, they're not going to want to be on it because it realistically, it should be a win-win. Win for you, win for them.
Right.
So it's all about, the professionalism aspect. So getting better every time, getting more professional every time.
When we talked about having guests, I think that's why we have been as successful as we have. Because when we started talking about having guests, we talked about having people on. What are they going to get out of this?
Yeah.
Not so much of who can we have on to make us famous? That's never been a conversation that you and I have ever had.
No.
It's who can we bring on? What do they bring to the table? What are they going to do for our listeners? And what is this going to do for them?
Yeah. It was kind of like a mutualistic type of relationship where not who's going to make us famous, but we want to benefit from having our guests on, but it's never who's going to get us the most downloads or the most views. It's who can we talk to that's going to give us the best insight to better ourselves and better our listeners. And then, like you mentioned, what are they going to get from it? Why is someone going to want to sit down? Because if you talk about, meeting up with them or logging onto the Zoom, talking about how the interview's done, recording the interview, and then saying your goodbyes afterwards, that's about an hour and a half or 2 hours of their time that they have to set aside. So who's going to want to spend 2 hours of their time if it's not worth their while? So how are we going to make it worth their while? We don't pay anybody financially to come on. Right. We don't give them things to come on. It's, can we promote them to a public forum? Can we spread the message that they have to spread? That sort of thing. And we've been blessed enough where people have been more than gracious with their time, and they've come on and talked to us, and that's super, super valuable to us because two busy guys, we know how important time is. So we respect their time, and we are so thankful and gracious that they've given their time to us. And then it's the same thing with the listeners. Like, I'm elated that people listen to the show and are giving us their time to listen to it.
It's crazy. I talk to people all the time, not all the time, because I don't know a bunch of people that listen to it on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. But the few people that I do know that listen to it literally on a regular basis, like they wait for it to come out. It's weird the conversations I have with them because it's like, it's hard to believe that somebody wants to log in and listen to us every week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, and the one in particular, we actually had him on as a guest when we had Jared on. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to him, and he said it's weird because I called him. He said, it's weird hearing your voice on my phone after I hear your voice on my phone because I was just listening to this week's episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you really listen like every week? He's like, yeah, dude, it's definitely worth giving an hour of my week.
I think that people, too, you would be surprised, and I say this with humility and surprise as well, I think you'd be surprised at the number of people that actually do listen with somewhat regularity because I thought the same thing. I thought, there's people that listen to particular episodes. So let's talk about Natalie. We have Natalie on. There's going to be a lot of fitness competitors that compete as well that are going to listen to her episode. Right. Or, when we had Coach McComas on, who was the head coach of the wrestling program, we had a lot of school personnel and community members locally listen to that because they're familiar with it and it's something that interests them. Or like when we had Josh, who's a world record powerlifter, one of the best powerlifters pound for pound to ever live. When we had him on, we had some powerlifting contingency there. So when we have these guests on, you think that there's, specific groups of people that would listen to them. But I was, beyond surprised at the number of people that listen regardless of who's on, even if it's just you and I going back and forth. Because I was kind of, I don't want to say worried, but a little bit apprehensive when we started having guests on to going back to episodes where it's just you and I talking about nonsense together. Because I thought, those downloads are going to be really low because people aren't going to want to listen to him and I just,
jabber.
Yeah, and talk shop when there's not a guest on who's a very successful person who has valuable information to share. And when there's people out there that tell me they value our information, I think that that's pretty crazy because I'm like, wait, we don't really say anything that, at least in my estimation, that's too important or too vital, but thank you regardless. I appreciate it.
It's humbling.
Oh, it's extremely. Yeah.
Because like I really embody that I don't know anything. Like I know we say that all the time, but I really don't. I feel like I don't know a whole lot about anything.
Well, the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know anything too.
Yeah.
Like that's, in the coaching business, for example, when you're working with people's bodies, you spend so long trying to figure out a certain client's body. And just when you think you figured it out, you work with another client who's so far different from them, and you realize, okay, I know absolutely nothing about the human body because I just spent so long doing it with this person. So if you try to take the same approach with this person or a similar approach, you think it would work, and it would be the complete opposite.
Right.
There's certain consistencies that you see across people that are the same, but then when you get into the details, everybody's so drastically different that it makes you realize, gosh, I know nothing about this coaching thing.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
That's why you continue to gain more and more experience, and then you keep realizing you're smaller and smaller of a fish in a big pond when it comes to that. And it's with anything, like when you compete, you do higher and higher level shows and you realize, gosh, I am not as good as I thought I was, or I am a much worse bodybuilder or a much worse bikini figure competitor or physique competitor or whatever. You realize that you're not nearly at the level that you had thought you were. And it could be financially or professionally. You know, if you have a lot of money in your town and then you move towns to a bigger city, you say, oh, I don't have as much money as I thought I did because there's a lot of people making more money than me, or whatever your goals are.
Yeah, it's crazy when you start to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to start looking at the big picture. And I still get hung up in the small stuff and the right now. But it's like a goal. Like, we talk about goals all the time. But it really is like a goal of mine to only focus on the controllables.
Yeah.
And I love it. Because once I started doing that, I'm like happy all the time.
It's hard for me. That's still one of the things I struggle with is not focusing or only focusing on the controllables and letting the uncontrollables go. And I think that the same argument you give for allowing things to go is what keeps me holding on. So what I mean by that is you say, don't stress about it because you can't control it, right?
Right.
So you let that emotion go and be done with it. But for me, it's actually harder to have that type of a mentality for that exact reason. You can't control it. I can't control this, and that frustrates me because I don't have control of it. I'm used to having control of everything. I'm used to think about the things that I do. Not that teaching is controlling, but you're in an atmosphere where I know what's going to make you successful. Do this, and you're going to be successful. If I teach you this, you're going to learn, and you're going to be smarter because of it.
Right.
And then when we do a lot of testing throughout the year, where we test kids at the beginning of the year, we test kids in the middle, we test them at the end. And when they test them at the end and we compare the scores, the kids are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, look how much smarter. I couldn't do this at the beginning of the year. And the elementary kids are really excited to see it because they see how much they progress. Same thing with clients. Listen to me. Do what I tell you to do, and I promise you're going to be good. Right. You're going to earn that basketball scholarship. You're going to lose the 50 pounds of fat that you wanted to lose. You're going to gain the 30, 40 pounds on your bench press. So I'm used to having variables that are in my control that I can manipulate almost like puzzle pieces.
Right.
Or like, let me play the chessboard. Let me move my pieces on the chessboard or put the puzzle pieces together, and you're going to see the big picture that you want to see. But when there's variables that are outside of my control, it's very hard for me to say, to relinquish that emotion and say, okay, I can just let this go because I don't have control here. And that's hard. Yeah, it's really hard for me.
You can focus. So that's hard for me as well. And what I started doing is I focus on trying to control those things. I try to control the aspects that'll lead up to being in control of that situation. And I'm still not in control, but it's my way of still holding on to a little bit of my old habits.
And that's kind of, I think that's how my obsessive compulsive disorder kind of started to manifest itself, or actually I should say my anxiety started to manifest itself in obsessive compulsive disorder, because I was trying to make everything perfect that I could control, so that when something out of my control happened, it wasn't as bad.
Do you think all that is why you're so good at bodybuilding? Because
potentially,
you like to control the aspects of your physique.
I think so.
Diet and exactly how you do in the gym and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is because I want to control everything, like you said. So I'm going to control my diet, and it's going to do exactly what I want it to do. But there's drawbacks to that too, mentally, because when I get off, I don't want to say off of my diet, but when there's something comes up and I miss a meal, that kind of stresses me out, and then I think about it. Or when my meals are off and I have to squeeze in a meal before, even little things that people wouldn't think about, and that I shouldn't be this way, but I am, where it's I'm going to have this meal an hour and a half before I train. That's when my pre-workout meal happens, or an hour before I train. Well, it got pushed back, and this meal got pushed back, and I can't train later because I have clients that I have to train, so I have to train at the same time, but this meal's pushed back a half hour later, so now I got to have this meal a half hour before I lift instead of an hour before I lift. And now I'm going to get frustrated because my digestion's going to be off. I'm going to feel bloated during my workout. It's going to stress me out. And that's something that happens to me. Now trust me, man, I've come a long ways with getting better at it, but I'm still that far from the top. It's like bodybuilding itself. I've come a long ways from where I first started, but I'm a lot closer to the start line than I am the finish line.
Hey, that's good though, because that means you got a long ways to go.
Sure,
You
yeah,
got a long career to go.
yeah.
That's
I just
the way
taught,
look at it.
in terms of like accomplishments, like the pinnacle of the sport would be winning Mr. Olympia, and the start would be never competing and never lifting a weight. I can still see the starting line and I can't see the finish line. I'm a lot closer to someone that's never lifted before than I am to Mr. Olympia.
Right.
So like for me, that's something that keeps me going. But yeah, I definitely think there are pros and cons to being that not obsessive, but that like neurotic about having control over things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, control is something that's a double-edged sword for sure. There's definitely two sides to the coin. But like I said, I'm getting better every day at managing it. At least I feel like I'm getting better every day at managing it.
Right. I think that's part of the biggest thing about this whole life thing is just getting better at whatever it is you're doing every day.
Yeah.
And that's why I am so enthralled with like the weight loss thing, because that's something that we literally can physically control.
Yeah.
And get better at.
Yep.
I don't think I'd be as happy with it as if I couldn't control it. Like if I had a medical issue that prevented me from losing weight, I think I would struggle more.
Well, let me put it into terms that like listeners might be able to relate to too. If you have a person, and this is a personal example, something that I experienced. When I turned 16, I wanted a vehicle really badly because all of my friends had their own cars. And I thought that was awesome.
Right.
Like, especially the ones that their parents would buy them, like a Lexus or an Audi or like expensive cars at 16. And I thought, wow, that's so cool that you have that car. Like, Mom, Dad, why can't I have that car?
Right.
And my dad always told me from day one, he said, Charles, you can have any car you want in the world, but you got to buy it. And that was always his thing. Now, my parents were generous enough. Now, I didn't feel that they were generous at the time, but they were generous enough to provide me with a vehicle to drive, whether that was, my dad's Jeep or one of our trucks or my mom's minivan. It didn't matter. I always had a vehicle, but
it wasn't yours.
It wasn't mine. And that bothered me because all my friends had vehicles. And when I was in college, I want to say a sophomore was when I bought my first car. So I always had access to a vehicle when I was in high school. They weren't actually mine. I didn't physically own them. Freshman year of college, weren't allowed to have cars on campus because it's an inner city campus, so parking was limited, and city parking in the parking garages was outrageously expensive. So I didn't have a car, nor did I need one because I was in walking distance with wherever I needed to go. So then sophomore year of college, I bought my first car, and it was like $5,000. And because I worked, multiple jobs in high school, multiple jobs in college, just like I work multiple jobs now. And when I tell you the feeling that I had of accomplishment, of buying my own car, was so much more than any car my parents could have bought me. Yeah, and I know that sounds corny. I'm telling you guys, it's really how I felt. And like my first car was a 99 Dodge Stratus. And it was just like a little four-door sedan, beige color.
Epic.
And it was kind of like an older car, but it felt so cool to be like, yes, I bought that. My own money. And I took pristine care of it. And, I treated it very, very well, with keeping it washed and detailing the inside all the time. And, it was such a gratifying feeling knowing that I accomplished that versus I had that handed to me.
Right.
So there's something to be said physically about not having great genetics. Not that I don't have good genetics, but not having elite genetics. Mm-hmm. And knowing that when I got on stage, like, I earned that. And you can even see, like, people that I've beat that I've said, you shouldn't have lost to me because you have more genetic potential than I do. I can guarantee you that based on shape or structure or how long you've been doing this or whatever. And I earned that because I know that I suffered more than you did.
Yeah. Well, that's something I and it sounds corny, but I admired about you from early on. When we started talking about bodybuilding, that exact thing, you've told me that numerous times where you've competed against people where they're obviously here and you're down here, but you beat them.
Yeah, I heard
because of the work.
And that was something I was taught early on and that I learned early on with sports. There's always going to be guys that are bigger, faster, and stronger than you, despite what they do.
Right.
They were just born that way, naturally, whether it's in college or high school or middle school or grade school, or pee-wee. Like, there's always going to be people in any sport that are better than you, much better than you, because they're physically gifted and predisposed to be that way. So I kind of understood that from an early age. I remember one time I was watching a video with Dave Pulcinella, who was kind of the star of the, I think it was Raising the Bar series, where his brother, Mike Pulcinella, videotaped him. It's in the bodybuilding community. Mm-hmm. Most bodybuilders are familiar with those DVDs that came out. And Mike was an amateur bodybuilder who I don't think ever earned his pro card, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember one time in this video, Mike was talking about, competition. He said, there's 2 reasons why someone would beat me. He said, because they have better genetics than me, which is possible, or because they work harder than me, which is not. and I thought that was so cool, because he said, there's only 2 ways you're going to beat me. And one way is not going to work.
Right. You can't.
The only way you're going to beat me is if you have better genetics than me.
Yep.
And that's kind of the approach that I've taken. And I don't want to mitigate the work that other people do and say that I work harder than everybody, because I know that I don't. But I want to say that I work as hard as everybody. So, like, going into a show, I want to say, okay, there's no way that someone worked harder than me. There may be people as worked as hard as me, but I don't think you could have suffered more than I suffer. Now, that's taken within a certain amount of contextual significance, because there are people that did more cardio than I did. But me doing more cardio doesn't mean I would have been better.
Right. Exactly.
Because that's where bodybuilding's tough. Because the person who works the hardest as far as doing the most cardio or eating less food doesn't mean
they're the best product.
They're the best. Yeah, they're going to be the best product for sure. So, like, for me, I can't eat less food in certain circumstances because I'm going to lose muscle. So you could have 2 guys, and this guy could say, well, I ate less food than you, so I worked harder. No. You may have eaten less food, but that doesn't mean you worked harder. I think hard work is working intelligently, too.
Optimizing your performance.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, you have to work. I guess from what I understand from the bodybuilding thing is it's not just building. It's moving the pieces to the right spots and utilizing the calories and the food to do what you want it to do. It's manipulating every aspect of your body, not just because like from what you've told me, like the muscle part's the easy part.
Yeah.
It's meal timing and like you said, cardio timing, when to do fasted cardio, when to do everything is not just, ooh, I did more work than you.
Yeah. Because if that were the case, everybody would just spend more time at the gym, do more cardio, and eat less food, and they would be shredded. But it doesn't work like that. For some people, that's the answer. Some people need more cardio. Some people need less cardio. Some people need more food. Some people need less food. And I think that within yourself, working hard isn't just sticking to the plan, but learning your body enough to know what the plan is.
Right.
So like Austin and I worked together for years before we ever did a prep together, which was important because he knew my body extremely well before we even needed to do a show.
Right.
So doing a show was a little bit easier because there's still a learning process because you never dieted someone down, especially to that level, or he's never dieted me down to that level.
Right.
So like, with the way it is, you could throw everything you know about dieting, hundreds of clients that he's worked with out the window because I'm different. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
But he worked with me long enough to where he knows my body. So it made the dieting process a little bit easier. So I think that's hard work too, is taking enough time to learn what you need and what you don't need and how your body reacts and then just responding appropriately.
Yes.
And I think, again, not to get preachy, but use that in every aspect of life. Like, I know that there are people that have worked harder than me in different areas of my life. Or let me say this, people have worked harder longer. Mm-hmm. So like, I try to do the best I can with the clients I train. But I know that maybe one of the things holding me back is just I need to do it for 10 more years,
right?
And 15 more years and 20 more years. Then maybe I'll be more successful. Or like bodybuilding, I've been working pretty hard, but I haven't been working pretty hard for 15 years, So maybe after 10 more years, then that's kind of the cap I put on it myself personally. I put a 10-year cap on this. When I turned 30 this year, I said to myself, okay, I got 10 more years. realistically, you continue to make a certain amount of progress into your 40s and stuff. But I think I'm going to have a goal change at 40.
Yeah.
Where it's going to be longevity, optimizing health. Like, I don't want to say I'm going to like start running, marathons or anything like that, but I'm definitely going to change the way I approach things. But my bodybuilding window, I'm giving myself a 10-year cap.
Don't get me excited.
Yeah, with the marathon stuff. So I have a 10-year cap there. So I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing, but do it better and harder than I've done before and continue to allow the time to accumulate. And then pretty soon, I think that should make me pretty successful in where I want to be.
Yeah. So I put you on the spot.
Sure.
Do you have a show picked out, your next one?
I don't.
Or a group of shows, I should say.
So what? Yeah, I did 6 months ago, and now I don't.
No.
Because what happened was after I competed in November of 2019, so this past November, several months ago, I said to myself, I'm going to take 2020 off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't like using that phrase anymore because I did that for too long.
As a build phase.
Yes, I took years off, and that was I called it taking years off, and me telling myself that was like negative talk in my head.
Yeah, I got you.
Because then I had a nonchalant approach to it. And I was working hard, but I wasn't working nearly as hard as I thought that I was or that I should be. So I was taking 2020 to better myself and improve myself. And then I was going to do the Mr. Ohio in 2021. Now, when I set out to do that goal, that was ambitious. Not that I couldn't compete at the Mr. Ohio, but you know me, I'm at the point where I'm not going to do a show I can't win.
That's right.
There's no point in me doing this at this point in my life. I'm not going to do a show that I can't win.
Right.
So, like, I did the Mr. West Virginia, won my class and lost in the overall to the light heavyweight. Now, I didn't win, but that showed me that I am physically capable of winning that show.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on to the Mr. Ohio now, which I can actually compete in the state part of that because I couldn't technically do the Mr. West Virginia because I wasn't West Virginia resident, but I did the state show that was associated with that, which is the Mid-Atlantic Grand Prix, which I lost in the overall. And now I think, okay, I want to do the Mr. Ohio. So is that in 2021? It's going to depend on where it falls. Is it going to be in the summer? Is it going to be because the virus, not using that as an excuse, but using that as a obvious alteration of what my plans were. Because with me,
the time frame marker changed because
and I'm not one of those people where I can afford to have a 3-month setback.
Mm-mm.
Some people can. I can't because I don't have good enough genetics and I'm not big enough to be able to take that time off from the gym and still maintain a good amount of muscle. I mean, I did relative to what I had, but not relative to what I need to do to win Mr. Ohio. Right. Because there's people that are 250, 240, 230 competing in that, and I'm 200 pounds at the time. So like, I'm not good enough to be able to take 3 months off and pick right back up and be on target then. So I need to readjust the target, move the goalposts a little bit.
Right.
So when that is, I don't know.
But that's the goal.
For sure. Yeah.
Sweet.
That's the goal.
Cool.
And Austin and I talked about that, before. And I don't know. I look at long-term goal setting differently. I look at long-term goal setting as in being more urgent with my short-term goals.
Yeah.
Because long-term goals are irrelevant to me now because I've had long-term goals and haven't met them because the short-term goals weren't focused enough. So now what I do is I just have ultimate urgency with my short-term goals, and then I'll get to the long-term goal eventually. So like maybe setting like short-term goals, like Austin and I set weight goals, or we just started setting weight goals by certain time periods. Like let's be this body weight by this time. Now that can be a dicey area because then you look at body composition, like, I could gain 10 pounds by, a couple weeks from now, but is it going to be
muscle? Or
it's not going to be beneficial.
Right.
So we make sure that we're pretty conservative with those weight jumps and stuff. But I'm going to start focusing on those tangible markers and making them short-term. So then whenever the competition decides to
line itself up.
Yeah, exactly. When it starts, that's a good way to put it. When it lines itself up for me, I'll be ready then.
I can't wait.
So that's kind of where I'm at with things.
Because I've only been to one bodybuilding show, and it was the Mr. West Virginia show.
Yeah.
And the hype in that room compared to what I seen when I walked in the doorway, is stupid.
Yeah,
it's insane.
It's definitely very cool because there's a mutual understanding with most people, that almost everybody that goes, where the athletes all know what each other went through to get there. Mm-hmm. The families and the loved ones and the friends of the athletes have seen what it took to get there. So everybody knows how hard everybody worked. And there's a lot of tension going into a show, knowing that only a couple people are going to get rewarded for what they work, what the work they put in. Only a couple people. Now, some people, their validation would be top 5. So you don't just have to win to have validation, but you know that there's a large majority of the people that step on that stage that are going to go home disappointed. Mm-hmm. A lot of hurt feelings. And that was part of my motivation, was not letting myself down, of course, and then not letting everybody else down. Where people say because I've had, and I say this within a certain context also, where, I've won most of the shows that I've done, mm-hmm. but I've also been very, very intelligent about the way that I pick shows. I pick shows that I know I have a chance to win. Now, I don't cherry pick. I don't do shows that are low level shows that I'm for sure going to win this show. I do shows that I'm only going to win if I show up at my absolute best, but if I show up at my absolute best, I have a chance to win.
Right. You pick shows that give you the timeline to have your prep be perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense.
Which is how it should be for people.
Yeah, I mean, that was the crazy thing about Natalie. Her last couple shows were almost back to back.
Yeah.
And she, I can only imagine, I don't know how you guys do it, how you diet down, and then how these people can compete back to back to back, because I would imagine I would spiral out of control and you'd have to reel me back in eventually. You know what I mean? I don't know. I haven't done it, so I don't know. But
well, there's a point too where you do it, and then you have to understand that bodybuilding's the one sport where the more you do it, you don't necessarily get better. So the more you run, the more endurance you're going to get, and you're going to be a better runner. The more you play basketball, you're going to get a better skill set if you practice more and more and more. So usually there's a direct correlation with the amount you do something, the better you get at it. Competitive bodybuilding isn't the case because you don't get better competing. If you do a couple shows back to back, you may alter your peak week, manipulate your water differently, manipulate your sodium differently, manipulate your carb intake or your supplement use. So there's differences there that you learn and guess technically can get better, but you're not going to progress to be bigger and stronger unless you're in the gym working.
Right.
And when you're prepping, you're calorically, taxed. So it's actually making you worse in that aspect. So you kind of have to take a step away from the bodybuilding to get better at it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a sport that's unique in that way.
Right on.
So, man, we are over our prescribed time limit. Not that we have a time limit, but our 45-minute threshold that we like to adhere to. We're almost at an hour.
Yeah.
That went real fast.
Yeah. I drank my pre-workout 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Expecting us to be done, and then now you're starting to get anxious, I'm sure.
Starting to get itchy. Yeah. But it's all good. I enjoy it, man. I could sit here just like what Jared said when we had him on. Right after we finished, he said, I felt like we could sit there and go full Rogan.
Yeah.
On that episode.
Where we talked for 3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours. And I was like, yeah, dude, I like that analogy because I felt like I could too. And we're getting to the point where these organic ones where we not even a topic, because we've always been organic to the point where we don't have an outline, but we usually have a topic. But these last 3 episodes have been just so cool where it's just chit chat and see where it goes.
Yeah. And I hope that people like that. I mean, I want to give something of value, and usually we pick our topics to be something valuable. Right. Like, hey, this is our topic today. We're going to talk about it. Hopefully you learn something. And I don't want to necessarily, because we talk about how we don't have that much to offer sometimes. Right. Maybe people just like in listening to us talk. Because I know with some of Rogan's guests, he may have a particular guest on that I have zero interest in, but it's just nice hearing them talk about
everything,
hearing them conversate. You feel like you're a part of the conversation. So maybe people just enjoy, I hope that people just enjoy us talking because we sure as heck do it enough that I would hope that they would like it because Otherwise, their listenership is going to go down. So at this time, I guess would be a good place to give a little bit of a shout to our sponsor, Beast Mode Baking. So shout out to Shannon Knorr, who's the CEO and owner of Beast Mode Baking. You can contact Shannon at SKNORR13 at SNOR13. That's her Instagram handle, where she kind of hosts, I guess, or platforms Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure that they are packed fresh and shipped out to you ASAP. They offer a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. Apologize for a little skip there. My phone went blank when I was doing our read. I want to get to the point, too, full transparency here. I want to get to the point when we do these reads, like this commercial, where we actually record the commercial pre-recorded, maybe with some music in the background, and then splice it into the video, because I am the master at the iMovie, and I say that sarcastically. I've just learned to do it enough where I kind of can manipulate it. I can't make the podcast sound great. I can just get it to the point where we don't sound like complete noobs now.
Yeah, gotcha.
So like the intro, the outro, maybe raise the volume a little bit. You know, we still don't have the best microphones.
Right.
So like just enough to not make us sound too amateurish. Like we're not, I coached with a football coach for a couple years. His name was Coach Kibler. And he was a teacher at a local high school. I think he still coaches. You know, he's the head wrestling coach at a school for a while. And he's, you know, bounced around. He's a coach's coach. And one thing that Coach Kibler always used to say to the kids is it was almost like he would never give a compliment, but he would always say, not terrible. So from coming from Coach Kibler, that was a compliment. He would say, not terrible, guys, not terrible. So like because you were never great, right? And he's right. Like it wasn't terrible. But if you say it was good, it was never good, because good was acceptable. And we're never going to get to an acceptable level because we want to have something to work for.
I don't want to be acceptable.
Yeah, I don't want to be good. I want to be not terrible and continue to strive for good, strive for greater, strive for perfection. So he would always say not terrible. So I feel like our podcast has gotten to the point, hopefully, where we're not terrible.
Yes.
You know, some people probably think we're terrible. And to be honest, there's some times where I can't disagree with those people.
I agree.
Sometimes I think we're terrible, too.
Sometimes I sit here and I feel like, oh, man. Find something to say.
Yeah, what are we talking about? We're going off about nonsense.
Yeah.
But regardless, we've come to the end of another episode.
Yes.
This has been the Chasing Dreams podcast, episode 2 with Charlie and Justin. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. And as always, we hope to see you back next week.
Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the edge and